At the company charity gala, my manager clinked his glass and shouted, "Let's all applaud the person who works twice as hard to achieve half as much." The crowd laughed while I stood there frozen. I gritted my teeth, took a deep breath, and that very night, I emailed the CFO every fraudulent expense report I had ever seen him falsify, and watched his career burn down overnight. I never planned on getting revenge. I'm not the kind of guy who makes waves. I show up, I do my job, I go home. That's how it's always been. But that night at the charity gala changed something in me. Something permanent. I work in the finance department at a tech company based in Columbus, Ohio. It's not a huge place, maybe 200 employees. Just big enough that people can get lost in the crowd. I've been there for over 6 years. I know the systems inside and out. I don't mind the work. It's routine, stable. What I did mind was my manager, Blake Rollins. Blake walked around like he was some kind of hotshot. Always the loudest guy in the room. Expensive cologne. Flashy smile. He spent more time sweet-talking executives and flirting with the new hires than actually doing his job. When he did show up for real work, he usually handed me a mess and said, "Clean this up, Mason. You're the numbers guy." I didn't like it, but I took it. I thought that's just how things worked. Over the years, I started noticing little things. Receipts that didn't match vendor statements. Business expenses from restaurants that didn't make sense. Flights that got billed twice. At first I thought it was just sloppiness. But it kept happening. I started saving copies. Not because I had a plan, just because I knew something was off. Anyway, every year our company holds a charity gala. It's formal, catered, the whole deal. Big donors, clients, the executive team. People drink a little too much and pretend to be more generous than they are. I never really wanted to go, but my coworkers convinced me this year. "You should show your face," one said. "It's good for visibility." So I rented a tux and went. It was at the Hyatt downtown. The ballroom was decorated in gold and navy. Fancy lighting. Waiters walking around with trays. A jazz band played near the stage. Everyone was mingling, laughing, sipping champagne. I stood near the back, feeling like a background character. That's when Blake saw me. He came up, clapped me on the back hard enough to almost knock the drink out of my hand. "Mason, you clean up all right. Didn't expect to see you here." I just nodded. I already felt out of place. He started introducing me to people like I was his sidekick. "This guy," he told one of the clients, "he's the reason I get any sleep at night. Fixes all my messes." I tried to laugh it off, but something about the way he said it stung. Then the CEO got on stage and made a toast. Thanked the donors, praised the year's growth, typical stuff. Then Blake stepped up. He clinked his glass with a spoon and shouted over the crowd. Hold up, before we move on," he slurred slightly, "we gotta raise a glass to someone really special tonight." I already felt it coming. My stomach dropped. "This guy right here, Mason," he said, pointing directly at me. "Let's hear it for the guy who works twice as hard, to get half as much done." The crowd laughed. Loud. It echoed through the room. I stood there frozen. People turned to look. Some laughed. Others gave awkward smiles, clearly unsure if it was a joke or an insult. I tried to play it off. I gave a little wave and sat down. My face was burning. Blake laughed like it was the funniest thing he'd ever said. "Just messin' with you, man," he told me afterward, still grinning. I smiled. I nodded. But inside, I wasn't laughing. I left early that night. Didn't say goodbye to anyone. I drove home in silence. I sat in the dark for an hour, staring at nothing. Then I opened my laptop. I had everything I needed. Blake was cocky, but he wasn't careful. I had over 3 years of records. Photos of receipts. copies of reports, emails, notes I'd made just for myself. I never turned him in because I didn't want to ruin anyone's career. But now? I didn't care anymore. I spent the whole night putting together a file. I broke it down clearly: dates, amounts, vendors, fake reimbursements. I highlighted patterns, labeled attachments. I wrote out exactly what I'd seen, and when. Around 3:15 a.m., I sent the email. Subject line: concerning financial irregularities, Blake Rollins. I sent it directly to our CFO. I also CC'd the head of internal audit. I didn't include a long message. I just said, please review the attached records. These are all expense reports and reimbursement documents submitted by Blake Rollins over the past several years that I believe violate company policy. I've done my best to annotate everything. Let me know if you need clarification. That was it. At 9:42 a.m. the next morning, my phone buzzed. It was an email reply. Short. We're reviewing immediately. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. By 11 a.m., I noticed HR walk past my desk. They didn't say anything. By 11:45 a.m., Blake came out of his office, red-faced, escorted by a security guard. His laptop was in a box. He didn't look at anyone. He just walked out. People started whispering. I didn't say a word. Later that afternoon, there was a company-wide email saying Blake was no longer with the company and that leadership would be undergoing a full audit of financial procedures. It felt like justice. But that wasn't the end. Because the audit? That uncovered way more than just a few bad receipts. After Blake was escorted out, things got quiet. Too quiet. People in the finance department were tense, barely talking. You could feel it, something big was happening behind closed doors. I figured I'd done my part. I thought it was over. But 2 days later, I got called into a meeting with the CFO, the head of HR, and a woman I didn't recognize. She introduced herself as the lead auditor from a third-party firm. They had copies of my email printed out on the table. The CFO leaned forward. Mason, what you gave us was incredibly detailed. We appreciate it. But we need to ask, how long have you known about this? I told the truth. I started noticing it about 3 years ago. I didn't say anything because I didn't know if I should. I didn't have proof until more recently. They exchanged looks. The auditor asked, did Blake ever ask you to help him change anything? Delete anything? Sign off on something you didn't believe was valid? That part hit me hard. Because yes, he had. A few times, he handed me reports that didn't make sense and said, just process it, Mason. It's fine. I never signed anything false. I never changed the numbers. But I also didn't say no. I told them exactly that. The HR woman's face was hard to read. We appreciate your honesty. You're not under investigation. But we may need your help going forward. I nodded. I wasn't sure what that meant. But I was about to find out. Over the next week, they started digging deeper. And the deeper they went, the uglier it got. Turns out Blake wasn't just cheating on a few dinner receipts. He had created fake vendors. Submitted invoices for consulting services that didn't exist. Even worse, some of those payments had been approved, which meant someone else had to be in on it. That's when the rumors started. People in procurement were being called in for interviews. 2 mid-level managers in accounting were suddenly on leave. Then word got out that Blake had been close friends with the VP of Operations, Jim Lerner. They'd worked together at a different company before this one. Some people said Jim helped fast-track payments. Others said Blake had something on him. I stayed out of it. I came in, did my job, kept quiet. Then one night, around 7 p.m., I was still in the office catching up on reports. Most people had left. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I picked up. Mason? Yeah? This is Jim Lerner. I stood up from my desk. We need to talk. Off the record. I didn't answer. I know what you did, he said. And I know Blake's not smart enough to pull this off alone. I didn't respond. I think you and I should meet. I hung up. I told myself to forget it. But the next morning, there was an envelope on my desk. No name. Inside was a USB drive and a single sentence typed on a piece of paper: check the 2019 contracts folder. You'll find your smoking gun. I checked. On the USB was a document showing that one of the fake vendor accounts Blake used was registered under a shell company. And that company's registered agent? Jim Lerner's brother-in-law. Everything started to make sense. But it also meant something else. This went deeper than I thought. It wasn't just Blake. It was a network. And the company had no idea just how far it reached. I made a choice. I printed copies. I emailed the internal auditor again. I asked to speak in person. They brought me in for another meeting, this time with legal present. I handed them the evidence. Their faces went still. Where did you get this? The auditor asked. It was left on my desk. They looked at each other. Do you know who left it? I have a guess, I said. Jim Lerner called me last night. Said he wanted to meet off the record. They didn't say much after that. Just thanked me again and told me they'd follow up. 2 days later, Jim was gone. No explanation. His photo removed from the company site. Another email went out: leadership changes effective immediately. But now I wasn't sure who to trust. People looked at me differently. Some avoided me. Others whispered when I walked by. I wasn't just the quiet finance guy anymore. I was the one who took down Blake, and now Jim. I started getting emails from other employees. Some anonymous. People saying thank you or asking if I'd seen their manager's shady behavior. A few warned me to watch my back. One email just said, "You made some powerful enemies. Hope it was worth it." I didn't know if it was. But it was too late to stop now. Because what I found next. It made everything before look small. A week after Jim was fired, things at work felt like walking through a minefield. Departments were under review. People were quiet, scared. Nobody knew how much the company already knew, or how much more was about to come out. Then came the twist I never saw coming. I was at my desk on a Friday morning when I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. It had no subject line. The message just said, "He's not the only one who forged reports. You might want to take a closer look at your own name." Attached was a single PDF file. I opened it. My hand started shaking. It was an old reimbursement form, from 2 years ago, with my signature on it. But I hadn't signed it. The form approved a $4,600 training seminar for a vendor I'd never even heard of. The company name was fake. The expense code was wrong. And the kicker, it was processed the same week I'd been out on sick leave. I scrolled to the bottom. My digital signature. Forged. Clear as day. I felt sick. Someone had used my name, and probably others, to rubber stamp fraudulent expenses for years. I hadn't just stumbled on a scam. I had been made a part of it without knowing. That changed everything. I dug deeper. I went through the company system using archived access logs. Cross-checked expense reports with employee leave dates. I found 4 more reports approved under names of people who were out of office at the time, or, in one case, had already quit the company. It was a system. Built to hide behind us. Built so someone like me would never question it because my own name was on the documents. I printed everything and took it back to internal audit. They brought in legal again. This time, they didn't ask me to sit. just stood behind the table, flipping through the pages in silence. "This means forgery," the legal rep said. "On top of fraud. This is federal crime territory now." I asked, "Do you think it was Blake?" The auditor shook her head. "Blake didn't have this kind of access. Someone in IT probably helped him. Or someone above him." That's when it hit me, Blake was never the mastermind. He was a loudmouth. He was greedy. But he was too sloppy to pull this off alone. I started thinking about the CFO. He was the one who always brushed past these concerns before. He was the one who never questioned why certain reports took too long. And the truth was, he had the kind of authority to set up access without alerting anyone. I went back into the records. Looked at who signed off on Jim's promotions, Blake's raises, and even the fake vendor setups. The digital trail always stopped just short of the CFO, but it circled him too closely to be random. One of the fake vendor addresses? It traced back to a shared office space in Dayton, and the leaseholder was a company that the CFO's wife was listed on. That's when I knew. Blake and Jim were pawns. This thing went all the way to the top. Now I had to make a choice: do I keep handing things off to audit, or do I go higher? I knew if I pushed too hard, someone might try to frame me. That already almost happened. I called a lawyer. Quietly. A friend of my cousin who dealt in corporate law. I explained everything. He listened, then said something I'll never forget: "If what you're saying is true, you need to protect yourself. Not just your job, your life." That night, I backed up everything. Reports, emails, copies of forged signatures, vendor addresses, lease records. I put them on an encrypted USB and stored a copy in a safe deposit box. Then I wrote a timeline. Start to finish. Who approved what? What I found. And when. I kept it clean. Just facts. The next morning, I scheduled a meeting with the company's board liaison. It was risky, but I figured they'd want to know before federal agents knocked on their door. I walked into that meeting with a binder in my hand. I didn't smile. I didn't sit. I handed it to him and said, "I believe your CFO has been covering up a fraud scheme that's gone on for at least 5 years. Everything you need is in here." He looked at me like I'd set fire to the building. Then he opened the binder and started reading. And that's when the real storm started. After I handed over the binder, things moved fast. Faster than I expected. By the next morning, the CFO's calendar was wiped clean. All his meetings cancelled. An emergency board meeting was scheduled that afternoon. I wasn't invited, but I didn't need to be. The fallout was coming, and I was standing in the middle of it. Around 5:30 p.m., I got a call. Not from HR. Not from legal. From a federal investigator. "I'm with the U.S. Department of Justice," she said. "We've received documentation regarding fraud within your company. I'd like to ask you some questions." I met with them in person 2 days later. I brought the same binder, same USB copies, and everything I had backed up. I answered every question. I was nervous, sweating through my shirt, but I was honest. They took it seriously. Very seriously. Turns out I wasn't the only one who had come forward. Someone in IT, someone in procurement, and, to my shock, one of Blake's old interns had reported strange activity, but none of them had the full picture until my report tied it all together. Within 2 weeks, subpoenas were issued. The Fed showed up at our office. They took computers, hard drives, company phones. Everyone watched in silence as they walked out with boxes. By the end of the month, the CFO was arrested. Wire fraud. Forgery. Embezzlement. He'd funneled over $2.3 million into fake vendors and shell companies over the course of 6 years. He was caught trying to transfer personal assets days before the raid: cars, a boat, even a property in Naples, Florida under his sister's name. Too late. Jim, the VP of Ops? charged as a co-conspirator. He tried to claim ignorance, but his name was on enough paperwork to bury him. Turned out he got a cut of the fake consulting payments every quarter. Money that was quietly funneled into his wife's nonprofit that didn't actually exist. And Blake? Here's where it gets brutal. The investigation proved he did participate, but in a smaller way than everyone thought. Turns out he thought he was playing the system, but he was being played, too. He forged receipts, yes. Lied on reports, yes. But the big theft? That came from above him. They let him do the dirty work, kept him drunk on power, and made him feel untouchable while using his access. In court, Blake tried to throw everyone under the bus. Claimed I was in on it. That I helped him process the documents. But remember that forged signature? The one on the reimbursement form from when I was sick. The timestamp on the file showed it was created using Blake's login, during my sick leave. When the DOJ put that on the screen, I watched Blake's face go pale. He was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison. Fraud, forgery, and obstruction. Jim got 8. The CFO? 10 years, no parole. Plus a lifetime ban from holding any financial role in a public company. The court forced the sale of his house, his wife's assets, even his pension. Gone. The company was hit with a massive audit from the SEC and had to lay off several executives. The board publicly apologized. I was mentioned by title, not by name, in the official statement as the employee who brought to light a pattern of unethical and illegal activity. But I wasn't finished yet. A month after the sentencing, I filed a whistleblower claim with the IRS and the SEC. I gave them everything. Copies, emails, proof of tax fraud and securities violations. 6 months later, I received a certified letter. I was being awarded a whistleblower payout. My cut? $396,000. I used that money to move out of Columbus, buy a house in Asheville, North Carolina, and start fresh. I got a remote finance job at a smaller, private firm that values integrity. No corporate galas. No snakes in suits. Sometimes people ask if I miss my old job. I don't. Do I regret staying silent for so long? Yeah. A little. But do I regret taking down every last one of them when they crossed the line? Not for a second. Blake mocked me in front of the whole company. Laughed at me like I was nobody. That laugh cost him his freedom, his career, and his future. And me? I finally found my voice. And when I used it, it burned down everything fake around me. Let that be a lesson. Some of us may be quiet. But we're always watching.